Hello novelists, here we are at the very end of your online novel writing program, and as always at these times I feel a little sad because we've come to the end of something rather lovely, and also very excited for you actually, because now you're going to go on to complete your novel and maybe start on the next one and move on to the next part of your journey, which is now a journey as a writer, as a novelist, rather than perhaps someone who was just thinking about it and hadn't really got round to doing much about it. Now, at this point, I just wanted to share with you some of my own experiences, because what I've found is that rather than it putting people off when I tell people how difficult it is to actually get published and that it doesn't all happen automatically and so on, rather than putting them off, they actually find that somewhat comforting. So I'm just going to relay to you a few of the experiences that I had from starting out to getting to the point that I'm at now. And basically it just takes a very long time. Publishing time seems to work on a different parallel universe course than ordinary time. So that's something you get used to over the years. But basically from the very beginning, from my very first thought about Jane Blonde, for instance, which was back in 1998, it was a process of 8 years before my book actually became published. So in 1998 I dreamed up the idea. In 2000 I started on my writing course, my master's degree in writing for children. At the end of 2002, the end of that course, I actually wrote the first version of Jane Blonde. Then in 2003, I moved to New Zealand, and there I got an agent. And I handed her a portfolio of 6 or 7 things that I'd written, and she was the one who actually picked out Jane Blonde and said, "This is the one." And then she took that back to the UK after another year's editing. And so in 2004, she took it to the UK, found Macmillan, and I actually got my first contract. And then the book actually came out after much more editing and toing and froing across the world. It came out in February 2006. Now, that process then speeded up, so the books that came after that would take more or less a year to work out, from contract to writing, through editing, and then on to publication. But you can see it takes a very, very long time to get going. And as I say, I'm not trying to put you off. I'm trying to hold your hand a little bit through the expectation process, because you can find yourself very frustrated. And actually, that's the wrong state of mind to get into. You just want to know that you're writing good stuff, and also recognize that they won't all be the one. I handed my agent that set of 5 or 6 trial first few chapters, and she said, "This is the one." Now, I'd written those other 5 or 6 books in completion. So I think I mentioned to you on my plotting module that I wrote my first book in a great hurry. It was 24,000 words, a children's book, and I immediately stuffed it in an envelope and sent it off to a publisher. And of course, now looking back at it, I can see that it wasn't ready at all. But anyway, that one fell by the wayside. Nothing ever happened with that. I wrote my next novel, historical fiction, on my master's degree as my thesis. And on the strength of that, I got an agent in the UK. And that went off to a couple of publishers, and nothing ever happened with it, and it's still not, to this day, been published. In the meantime, I was writing, and I probably wrote 3 or 4 other novels. And they are so old, this was so long ago, that I may never see them again, because they're all stored on floppy disk. Not even on CD, on floppy disk. And so few people have computers that can access floppy disks these days that I suspect those works are never going to be retrievable. And if I didn't have hard copies of them, and often I did not, then they're just gone forever. And that's maybe sad, or maybe not, because they weren't the one. And you will sort of know when you're writing the one, because you'll get that physical reaction that I talked about. You'll start to feel a buzz in your sternum and recognize that, yeah, this is something a bit special. I've nailed the process here. I understand what I'm doing. I'm putting together great characters and a wonderful plot and writing it in such a way that it has its own unique style, which reflects me and my author's voice, and I've chosen the right narrative voice. So these are all the considerations that go into you suddenly recognizing that maybe this is the one. And then what you have to do with that one, and with all the others in fact, is you have to get some feedback. And you won't like all the feedback, but start to learn to read through your rejections and look for clues. A standard rejection will sound something like, "Thank you for your application. We enjoyed reading your book, but I'm afraid it's not appropriate for our list." That's quite a common excuse. It's not appropriate for our list. And it might not be an excuse. That might be absolutely the truth. It might not be the kind of thing that they publish. However, if they write back to you and say, "We loved your style. This is not right for our list, but please do send us anything else that you have," then what you do is you send them anything else that you have. Because the temptation, and this is something that I did and that all the other authors I know have done, is you see that rejection and you just see the fact that they're not taking that one book. And you forget to read through and look for the clues in the rest of it. So if they were to write back to you and say, "We really loved it, we didn't like the ending, and thanks for submitting it," you could contact them and say, "If I change the ending, would you be interested in seeing it again?" If you think that they may have a point, and often you do realise that they do have a point after a certain amount of time. So you do learn to deal with rejections. My first adult novel, The Two Miss Parsons, which at that time was called Excess Baggage, went off to a number of publishers in the UK. My agent was so enamoured of it, thought it was so brilliant, that she honestly thought we'd get into a bidding war, which is where various publishers fight over your novel. So she sent them all off to about 10 publishers and requested a very short deadline, so they only had a week to read it and get back to her, because that's the way you G up a bidding war. Now, unfortunately, for whatever reason, this didn't suit any of those publishers, and so what actually happened was I got 10 rejections overnight, all at once. And at that point you just have to go, well, that's really quite funny. We'd played the game wrong. That was obviously what had happened there. And I then went on and realised that maybe the UK wasn't the place for that book, and it went on to be published in New Zealand as The Two Miss Parsons. So, yeah, you learn from your mistakes. You learn to take rejection, you get a bit more stoical about it, and the reason that you get more stoical is that you start to recognise that you've got more than one book in you. If it doesn't happen with that one, it may be with another one, and that you have to do all your research and you have to work out who likes what and why therefore they're going to choose to take on your particular book. So really, what this boils down to is you come back to the realisation that the reason you write, the reason you are a novelist, is because you love it. And when people ask me why I write, even when it's very difficult at times to get your work out there, the answer that I give them is that I cannot not write. It's part of me. I can't not do it. It's just something I have to do in order to be happy, to be Jill Marshall, to be feeling as if I'm complete. So that is part of my makeup, and it's part of your makeup, and it's something you're going to learn to love and to concentrate on the fact that you're doing this for your own personal satisfaction, and that if someone else then gets great satisfaction out of your story, that's a bonus. So that may take some time to come to, but that's the reason why I would encourage you now that you've come to the end of your novel writing course, and perhaps you've been in a fit of enthusiasm writing madly and have finished your novel, in that case, prep it, parcel it up, send it off somewhere, decide what you're doing with it. If you want to do it as an ebook, or you want to self-publish, or you want to do a few copies on Lulu just to see how it looks, then decide what you're doing with it, do it, send it off, and then try and forget about it and start on the next project, because that is what makes the difference between successful novelists, and if your standard of success is publication, then most authors you find who are published have been doing this for a long time, and very few get massive success with their first book. And even if they do get massive success with their first book, it's taken them much longer than you realise to get there. So it might have been their first book for 6 years, and on the face of it, it looks as though they had overnight instantaneous success, but in reality they've probably been working at this for a very long time. So don't give up the day job just yet, but do carry on and make sure you start your next book. Just start planning it, just start thinking about it, just allow yourself to move on in the next stage of your own journey. And if you like, see it in plotting terms, you've actually just created a catalyst by sending off your book. That's gone somewhere, and now it's left this slight emptiness of what comes next. So that's when you start your next project. So I do hope you've thoroughly enjoyed all of this learning on your novel writing program. I hope you've taken some of the things on board, and I hope they've made an immense difference to your writing. And most of all, I hope that you enjoy your novel writing and learn to love it just because it's part of you, and that's what you are. You are a writer. We're all writers together, and if you want some ongoing support and contact with me, then you can sign up now for Write Good Stuff premium services by going to the Write Good Stuff website, and I'll prompt you from time to time with a few exercises, with competitions, with additional teachings. So it may be you can join a webinar to learn more about a particular topic, which may be on getting published, or it may be more about dialogue writing. It may be more about how to format your ebook. So I will choose various topics, and I'll ask you from time to time what you would like to know more about. And the conduit for that will be Write Good Stuff premium services. And you'll also on there be able to access discounts on the other online programs and on manuscript assessments. So throughout this Module 8, I've talked about the importance of special editing and careful editing. So you will know whether what you require is copy editing, which I don't do on its own. I only do it in combination with a structural edit. Or if you need to check out the structure or the characters or some part of your novel, which is what we've discussed over these last 8 modules. So you can access more support from me, and I really hope to keep in touch with you and help you on your journey growing into this fabulous novelist. I look forward to hearing more from you, and the very, very best of luck.